Hello and welcome to another Open the Book. Even though it's good to have lots of friends, sometimes there's someone who is extra special to us. We might say he or she is our best friend. Having a special friend can be great, but in today's story, as we hear more about David, we find out that being best friends can sometimes land you in a lot of trouble. So my friend Sue is now going to open the book and read Best Friends.
David was Jonathan's best friend. Jonathan was David's best friend. David and Jonathan were best friends, but they weren't ordinary friends. Jonathan was a prince in the royal household, the son of King Saul, and David was just a shepherd boy. So how did David and Jonathan become friends? They met for the first time on the day that David killed the giant Goliath. Jonathan was so impressed with David that he gave him his royal robe, his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. And they were friends straight away. David became a famous soldier. He moved into the royal palace and he even married the king's daughter. But King Saul was jealous of David. He knew that everyone loved David more than they loved him, and that made him really angry. One day, while David was playing the harp to calm Saul down, Saul threw his spear at him, and David had to run for his life. Saul sent soldiers to find David. He even looked for him himself, but no one could find him. A few weeks later, when Saul had calmed down, he sent David an invitation to join him at the palace for the festival of the new moon. But David didn't trust Saul after the incident of the spear, and he was afraid that it might be a trick, so he arranged to meet Jonathan in secret. "Jonathan, my friend," David asked, "why is your father trying to kill me? I don't understand what I've done wrong." "Kill you? Never," replied Jonathan. "I'm sure you're wrong. My father tells me everything, and I'm sure he would have said something." "Are you sure?" David asked. "He knows we're best friends, so he's not likely to tell you, is he?" "Tomorrow I'm supposed to have dinner with him at the palace, but I need to make sure that it's safe for me to go." Jonathan saw how worried his friend was, so he asked, "What can I do to help? I'll do anything you ask." "I know," David suggested. "Tomorrow I'll stay away from the festival. If Saul asks after me, tell him you've given me permission to go to Bethlehem to celebrate the festival with my family. If he's angry, we'll know he wants to harm me. But if he doesn't mind, then I'll know it's safe to come back." Jonathan was worried. "But how will you know if he's angry or not? How can I get a message to you without my father finding out?" They put their heads together and came up with a very clever plan. The next evening, when the royal court was seated for the first day of the festival, David's place was empty. Saul looked but didn't say anything. But when the same thing happened on the second day of the festival, Saul asked his son, "Where is David? Why hasn't he come to the festival as I asked?" "Father," Jonathan replied, "I gave David permission to spend the festival with his family in Bethlehem. That's why he hasn't come to the king's table." Saul was furious. "You foolish boy," he shouted. "Don't you realize that as long as David lives, neither you nor your descendants will ever become kings of Israel? Go and fetch him. He must die." Jonathan was horrified. David was right not to trust Saul. Jonathan couldn't believe it. Seeing Jonathan hesitate, Saul became so angry that he threw his spear at his son. Then Jonathan knew that his father really did want to kill his friend. As soon as the sun rose the next day, Jonathan set off to warn David. David was waiting for him in a nearby field, hidden in the long grass so that no one could see him. Jonathan had brought his archery set with a large bow and plenty of arrows, and a small servant boy to fetch and carry. "I'm going to practice shooting some arrows," he said to the child, "and I want you to run and fetch them for me." And this is where the clever plan came into action. Jonathan shot an arrow high into the air. The boy ran after it, and just as he reached it, Jonathan called out, "Hurry, go quickly, don't stop." And David, hiding in the grass, heard him. That was the signal, the sign to David that his life was in danger and that he must run away. So David ran, and he ran. And from that day onwards, he became an outlaw, running for his life from the angry king. King Saul made it very difficult for Jonathan and David to be friends. Jonathan had to choose between his father's anger and his friend's life, and he chose to save his friend.
What a difficult situation for Jonathan to be in, between his father's jealousy and his best friend. How brave of him to try and do the right thing and save his friend's life. We may not often be in a position to save our friends' lives, but every day we can choose to do the right thing for our friends. I want you to think of a time when you could have stepped in to help your friend, maybe yesterday or last week, but you didn't. Think about what you might do differently next time. Now I'm going to say a prayer, and if you'd like to make that prayer your own, then do say amen at the end after me. Dear God, please help us to look after our friends and to stand up for them if we need to. Amen. So that's it for this week, and we'll see you next week for another Open the Book.